everyone! Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm gonna talk about what my work experience in New Zealand has been like since I first started working at the age of 16 to now almost 25. Over the years, I've had a few jobs, 9 to be exact, and just like everyone else, I first started working on minimum wage jobs. The good thing about New Zealand is you don't actually need a degree to get a decent job or a good paying job here unless you're going into an industry that specifically requires a qualification. For example, if you want to be a teacher, a nurse, or a doctor. But most of the time, you can actually work your way up by gaining enough experience and expanding your skill set, and you'll be able to get a good job that pays pretty well. So what was my very first job in New Zealand? I was actually working as a bakery assistant in one of the supermarkets here in New Zealand, and I started a job when I was 16 and still in high school, and I actually stayed there for about 2 years. This was around 2013, 2014 until about 2016. So at this job, I was on minimum wage, and at the time the minimum wage in New Zealand was $13.75. When I first got this job, I actually had zero experience because I was still in high school. So how I got the job was actually through my mom, who first got the job there, and basically she recommended me to her boss because I think she was leaving at the time. So because she had the connection, she was able to recommend me and I was able to get the job. So I worked there for 2 years until I finished high school. And while I'm grateful to have had this job and it's given me a starting experience in the job market, it wasn't the best job that I've had. It was actually pretty difficult because I was still in high school, so I could only really work on the weekends or at nighttime. And on the weekends, the start time would be really early, around 4 o'clock until about 12 o'clock midday. And my role at this job was to pack bread and basically keep the bakery tidy and serve customers as well. Probably the thing that I hated most about this job was scraping the trays or the bakery trays, because you would spend hours just scraping and scraping the trays that the bakers used every day. And that can get pretty exhausting, and of course it's a bakery, so it does get dirty. But I managed to stick it through until I finished high school. Shortly after I finished high school, I started looking around for different jobs because I know that I didn't want to stay at that job forever. So I actually got a job working as a glassy in a club or a bar in one of the places in Palmerston North where I used to live. Basically, what the glassy means is that I was in charge of picking up the glasses that's been left by customers from the club. And because it's a nightclub, you could imagine that people are always drunk and they're leaving behind glasses everywhere on the floor. They could be dirty, there could be spew everywhere. So I actually didn't last at this job very long. This was probably my quickest job. I lasted there for about 2 months. And another reason why I didn't like this job was because the hours were actually really late. Because it's a nightclub, I started work at 11 o'clock and then I won't be finishing till about 3 or 3:30 after the bar closes. I had this job around 2016, and this time the minimum wage was around $15.25. I wasn't given many hours because they just couldn't give me enough hours, so I also just had to figure out another way to earn money and find a new job. So after this, I actually got a job working as a waitress in one of the restaurants in Palmerston North. And I was in this job for about 4 months. Now around this time, the minimum wage was around $15.75 and I was working around 20 hours a week. Now being a waitress in New Zealand is actually quite different from being a waitress, let's say, in the United States. So in New Zealand, giving tips is not actually a big thing. And I remember getting a tip once for $10 and I was very happy with that. Now this job wasn't so horrible. I actually enjoyed it for quite a bit. It exposed me to customer service and I was able to gain experience through that. But the reason that I decided to leave and look for a different job is, of course, there's no progression and I didn't see myself working in a restaurant. So if I wanted to maybe become a bartender or the manager of the restaurant, I would have stayed. But for me, I just wasn't interested in doing that kind of work. So again, after a few months, I looked for another job yet again. So because of this, I actually decided to look for another job while still being a waitress. So I thought I could work 2 jobs at the same time. And I did for about a month. And at this time, I was really interested to work in a clothing store because I was at that age where I was really interested in fashion. And I just thought that working in a clothing store would be really fun. So while I was still a waitress, I actually got a job as a retail assistant working for one of the clothing stores here in New Zealand. Now, this job again didn't last very long because The company actually got liquidated shortly after I started, so this was quite sad for me at the time. But luckily, in the same mall, there was actually an opening for another retail assistant at a different clothing store. I applied for the job and thankfully I got it. And I lasted at this job for about a year and a half. However, the problem for me at this time was I wasn't getting full-time hours when I wanted to work full-time. The most I've had, from what I remember, was 30 hours per week, but that wasn't consistent, and I remember that was only during the busiest times of the year, which was around Christmas. Overall, I really enjoyed the job, but what I found difficult was actually the physical side of it. The store that I worked at was really high paced, it was really busy, and I was always on my feet. And I just remember coming home every day so tired, with my feet sore, my back sore. Eventually, I kind of got tired of the physical side of it and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. So I started thinking what other job I might be interested in. And at this time, I was really interested to get an office job so I could just sit at an office. So after a year and a half, I actually saw a job online through an agency for a 3-month contract working for a call center. I ended up quitting my job for this 3-month contract, which was a big risk because obviously after that I wasn't sure if I was gonna have another job, and it was just a risk that I easily took at that time. But it turned out that that risk was actually really worth it. So I worked at this call center, and what I did was actually answer phone calls for a Christmas club for one of the New Zealand supermarkets here. And from what I remember, it was pretty easy because the calls that were coming through were mostly customers asking how much the balance in their card is, or customers that forgotten their PIN number. So it was pretty easy to learn, and I actually quite enjoyed the work. Now, I worked at this job from November 2017 to around January 2018, and around this time the minimum wage was $16.50, and I remember just being slightly above that working for this job. Now when the contract was nearing to an end, I of course had to look for a different job. In the end, I found another call center job for one of the departments or organizations here in New Zealand, and it was for a contract for 18 months. So I applied for that, and because I already had experience in call center, I think that really helped in my CV and my application. And for me, this was actually the start of my career, because I am still with this organization up to today, just doing different roles. So the first role that I took in this organization was working in the contact center. So I actually did this for about 10 months, and what I did was answer calls from customers asking about their accounts and just helping them through some information that they needed. And around this time, the minimum wage has increased, and I started out getting approximately $20 to $21 an hour. I remember that when I first started at this role, there were 8 of us in the group, but eventually people started leaving after the training because some people actually found that they didn't enjoy the job, or it wasn't what they thought it was. Now, I could understand that because sometimes dealing with customers can be quite intense, but I managed to stay in this role for about 10 months until a new role opened up that I applied in. And that role was for debt collection within the same organization. So my job in this role was basically to collect debt. So that involved making phone calls to customers who owed us money and negotiating payment with them. So I actually had this role for about 2 years. During this time, from having started in the contact center to working in debt collection, I was earning between $21 to $24 per hour, which is a pretty good rate in New Zealand. So during this time, I actually managed to pick up a few projects at work to gain more experience. So I had consistent conversations with my manager about what I wanted to do and what experience could help me get to where I want to be. So I picked up a few projects, and I think the turning point in my career in this organization was when I was asked by one of the managers if I have any experience in design, and I didn't. Like, I had 0 experience, but I said I was willing to give it a try. So basically what I had to do was, if you see a document with pictures and icons and different colors, make it look presentable and appealing. That is basically what I did. So that actually opened up a lot of opportunities for me, because first I was able to network around the organization and meet a lot of people. I also managed to learn a lot about our digital tools, and I was able to gain experience in design itself. And that again opened me up to learning more about the digital tools that we have. And for me, that was my area of interest because I like working digitally. As you can tell, I make videos right now. I like working with apps and digital tools and all that kind of stuff. and this allowed me to really gain experience and gain exposure in the area. So this helped out my CV. So around April to May 2021, I actually saw a role come up for what we call a learning designer, which was to design learning for our organization, which I applied for and thankfully got. This role was actually only temporary because it was a secondment for 6 months, and after this I was meant to go back to my original role. Now thankfully a permanent position actually came up for the same role, which I had to apply for, and thankfully I got the role. So what I do for this current role that I have, I develop learning modules for our internal staff within my organization so that they can learn what they need to learn for them to do their job, if that makes sense. Now it is a pretty demanding role and it can be challenging because a lot of the times you really do have to network, be able to problem solve, and make good decisions. But it is a really rewarding role because it's an opportunity to really make a difference and hear what people struggle with and be able to come up with solutions to fix those problems. So I really enjoy the job that I have now, and I'm really grateful for all the experiences that I've had. So that's all my work experience in New Zealand. Now I don't know what the future holds for me and I can't make any guesses or predictions, so I'm just gonna have to wait and see what life brings me. But overall, my advice is, if you're interested to work in New Zealand, or maybe if you're already in New Zealand just starting out work, is to not be afraid to put yourself out there. And really, for me, what really helped is being vocal about it, to be vocal to your managers or to people around you of what you want to do or the things that you're interested in, and put your hand up to do things that other people might not necessarily want to do, because it shows your initiative and your willingness to learn. So I think for me that's really helped out in my career, but also eventually you do have to learn to say no. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you did enjoy it. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. If you don't know, my name is Jules and I create videos about my experiences in living and working in New Zealand. So if you're interested in that kind of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate it, and let me know in the comments as well what you might be interested in watching next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. See ya!